And very simple things are found on day one of the autopsy, as you know with other sudden deaths. How many bullet wounds, and most important, did my loved one suffer? Pain and suffering is concerned. And we can answer those questions on day one on the basis of the injuries, such as when there's a damage to the brain, bullet wound to the brain, that causes immediate loss of consciousness at that point. And telling that to the family can often be very helpful at a trying time for the family. So that's why we were called. I must say, when we were called, Mr. Crumpet said they'd been trying to get the FBI, the federal government involved without success at that time, and that's why they wanted me to come in. And shortly after we started the autopsy, whoops, Channel 5, I'm sorry, men die of accident, of homicide, every day in this country, and rarely, and never, as far as I recall, has the President of the United States got involved. You know, understanding what's happening. And one thing I want to add here, though, Mary Case is the chief medical examiner in St. Louis County, and she's a very excellent forensic pathologist, and I'm sure her work will turn out to be very, very excellent when it's released. But again, it hasn't been released yet, and the family wants to know certain simple questions that so far we've been able to answer. Sean Parcells has been instrumental in the autopsy evaluation. I don't know if you want to point out anything on the anatomy of the gunshot wounds, that beautiful drawing.
First of all, I'm Professor Sean Parcells, and I would like to thank everyone for bringing me into this case, and we're here for the family to answer questions about what happened to Michael Brown. And I want you guys to understand that when an autopsy is done, that we look at the body in an anatomical position. This is the anatomical position. This is not how we stand, how we walk, but medically speaking, we like to describe wounds this way. And as you all know, Dr. Bodden and I concluded that he was shot at least 6 times. We've got one to the very top of the head, the apex. We've got one that entered just above the right eyebrow. We've got one that entered the top part of the right arm. We've got a graze wound, a superficial graze wound to the middle part of the right arm. We've got a wound that entered the medial aspect of the right arm, and we've got a deep graze wound that produced a laceration to the palm of the right hand. Now these two, where the X's are, represent what Dr. Bodden and I feel are possible re-entry wounds. So the wound that hit the forehead right above the right eyebrow actually came out right around the right eye and went back in, and then it exited again right here in the jawline and came out and went back into the right shoulder. That's from one bullet. Now we have to confer that with the first autopsy. This wound right here to the side of the chest is also a possible re-entry wound. Now, which wound on the arm that correlates to, we're not sure. We have to correlate all of this with the first autopsy. And the other critical point that I want everyone to be very clear on is that this wound to the medial aspect of the right arm, just generally speaking, happened right about here. Okay? So what Dr. Bodden and I feel that occurred, and by the way, this red mark is showing that same wound. This is not a separate wound. This is showing the same wound in the same location in that arm, but you're looking at it from the back. And as the attorneys were saying, there was a witness statement that said that he was walking away and the gun goes off and he kind of jerks. So the question asked to us was, could that wound occurred from him walking away and then he turns around? It's consistent with that. However, understand too that while the shot could have come from the back, because if I'm standing here walking along and get shot from that direction, you see I pull my arm up, it's in that same general area. The arm is a very mobile part of your body. So it also could have occurred when he was putting his hands up. So I put my hands up and you see where that wound is at. It could have happened if he put his arms across in a defensive manner. We don't know. And we still have to look at other aspects of this investigation before we can really start piecing things together. Dr. Bowden?
Yeah, the attorneys behind me thought that there might be a question among you. We're here to seated young...
Are any of these wounds inconsistent with the witness accounts that Michael Brown was shot while rushing the police officers?
There could be consistent with his going forward or going backward, but they're for the front, and if he was shot going forward, he would collapse right away. The problem, yeah, so it's possible. There are a number of different possibilities to that. Any signs of a struggle? There weren't signs of a struggle. In talking about a struggle, one of the things that the attorneys have also asked for is the medical examination of the officer who was in a struggle. So signs of injury to the officer, to Michael Brown are both needed. One thing is that there are abrasions around the right side of Mr. Brown's face, rubbing against the ground, which happened, as best we can tell, when after the gunshot wounds he fell flat down unprotected and got those abrasions. Otherwise, no evidence of a struggle, and it will be important in evaluation of the case for the medical examiner, the FBI, for the defense, the family, to see what happened to the officer. Yeah, no, you got over here for a second.
Where the autopsy took place and how long it took?
Our autopsy that we did, the first autopsy at the county medical examiner. Second one was at the Arthur Lane Funeral Home, where the body was delivered for burial, and we did that in the office. And it was about 3-4 hour autopsy, a re-autopsy.
How do your findings resemble or differ from the county autopsy results?
Well, we can't answer that till we see the county. My impression, having done this some 50 years or so, is that they're going to be very similar.
When do you expect to have those in hand?
I think they're available now. The autopsy records are available now. When it's going to be released is probably up to the prosecutor.
Right. A few more. Right here. Excuse me. Right here.
I wanted to get that again. You said, could it be consistent with the way police said it happened and the way witnesses said it happened? Could you talk a little bit more about how this autopsy?
Well, the autopsy itself is consistent with police or witnesses. There are many different witness testimonies. Many of them seem to line up in one direction, some in another direction. Right now, till we get more information, till we get from a forensic science point of view, can't distinguish, can't make a definite judgment. Now the lawyers who've interviewed witnesses, we haven't interviewed, we don't interview witnesses, may be impressed with some witnesses who seem more trustworthy than others, and as the police are doing too. This is what juries are supposed to do. Juries are supposed to look at witnesses and tell who's telling the truth and who isn't. Well, lawyers do that all the time. And so they have more information than we have. But right now, from the science point of view, we can't determine which witness, and there are all different kinds of observations made, is most consistent with all of the forensic findings.
Gentlemen in green.
Doctor, you mentioned transparency, you mentioned scientific information, and you mentioned standards. Was there any investigative reason, any scientific reason why this information could not have been released after day one? Is there any reason
Well, no.
why it should not?
This is a judgment based on, and this is one of the things that the family was concerned about. Even though we know when an autopsy is done, when any autopsy is done that you guys go to, 95% of the information is available right away. Stab wounds, gunshot wounds, things like microscopic slides and toxicology, which may be of value but don't determine the cause of death. Whether or not a decedent has cocaine on board might be of value to see why an incident happened, but it has nothing to do with the cause of death. So I think that my impression is that like in most medical examiner's offices, when an autopsy is completed, the medical examiner can release it immediately, or most of it, pending the prosecutor's wishes, because if the prosecutor says that that's going to interfere with our investigation, then medical examiners hold up, and the families may not know for weeks and months the kind of questions we're talking about.
Two more. Dave, two more. Go ahead, Dave.
Can you speculate on what order the wounds occurred?
I don't think we can. We cannot speculate exact order of gunshot wounds. Forensically, that's impossible. However, Dr. Bodden, I do feel because of the 2 gunshot wounds to the head, indicating that Mr. Brown was bending over as they were coming down, that those 2 shots were most likely the last 2 to occur to him.
That's about as far as we can go.
What about toxicology?
Toxicology results have to be done by the medical examiner at the first autopsy. They get the blood and everything out. Second autopsy, no more blood, and there's been embalming fluids, etc. So we have to wait for the medical examiner, and it depends how quickly they're rushed. The toxicology should be able to be done in a week or 2, but oftentimes it gets on the end of the line of all the other cases that they're dealing with and may take months. But that should be available, especially with your concern and the President's concern. It should be available very soon.
Well, we got a feeling that that toxicology report, like other things, will be released to you sooner than later. There was one question from a non-press person. We wanted to ask it, and then we were going to. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My question is this. The 4 shots that entered his body first, I'm assuming that he could have survived. Am I correct?
Yes, he could have survived all the that's good. I should have mentioned something. All of these gunshot wounds were survivable, except for the one in the top of the head that went through the brain.
With that being said, and all of us here know what happened to Michael, why hasn't the officer Wilson been arrested?
You want to try to address that?
You know, well, who gets arrested, as you know, is a political district attorney decision, and it's not a forensic science decision, for good or for bad.
Thank you.